Well, hi everyone. Welcome back to the RTI Speed Tips by Bob and Chad. We're glad to be back here. It's been a couple of weeks. Um, a lot of things been going on in the last couple of weeks. Everything's been going. We've been super busy here. Uh, and of course, I just was talking to Chad a little bit before. So, how's things going at Weirs Machine?
Oh, we're doing good. Yeah, we keeping busy here. We got our 2021 catalog is ready to go. That's being printed, so that should be mailed out probably early next week. So be looking for that in your mailboxes. And that was a big hurdle to overcome. Usually this week we're supposed to be going to Indianapolis right now for the PRI show, which is after 22 years of really focusing on that. It's weird to not be preparing for an in-person trade show and going to Indianapolis. It's been a staple for so long for us, and so it's weird. It's definitely a weird year, but we're doing good. We're getting ready to do more of this social media platform stuff like you and I are doing. So we're plugging away.
And what about you? Right after the first of the year, you're going to do a live show there at Weir's Machine, correct?
Yeah, we're still planning on that January 2nd, doing a live day. We're trying to figure out a format that would work. We don't want people to have to sit around for 3 hours, so we're probably going to try and fit it into like an hour, 2 hour max, where we can go over all the new products and people can ask questions. Hopefully, we'll have some drivers here and whatnot. Tentatively, that's the same day as our Christmas party, so we're trying to figure out if they're going to cancel our Christmas party, or if we're going to have all them people come in here or not. So, with everything that's going on, it's still kind of one of them up in the air situations, but we're tentatively still planning for January 2nd for a live trade show in the showroom here where we can sit down and talk about all the new products and have some more time, other than a couple seconds we have on here weekly to talk about one or two items. This would be hours at length or, to talk about everything we do. So.
Sure. Yep, no doubt about that. Um, don't forget, guys, it's that time of the year. Christmas shopping is here. I know UPS has kind of made the statement down here that anything that's shipped after the 16th of December, if you're a ways from us, there might be a little bit of a delay in shipping. So if you want stuff by Christmas, yeah, you need to get it ordered by the 16th. The other thing, of course, we've got one Christmas present that's a great idea, a subscription to the RTI Knowledge Center. So that's a gift that you guys could definitely ask for, and it gives you access to the Knowledge Center for the whole year. We've got our special going on for the gift certificates. We've got a 10% discount going on for the next week on the gift certificates. And what we've got going on now is we're going to have a week-long special for the next 4 weeks. And this week's special, of course, is going to be the gift certificates. And then the other thing is going to be 10% off of Landrum Springs. The Landrum Spring Company, they're a great quality product. We've had really good luck with them. They've been around for quite some time, and they build good stuff. So that's one of the things, just to kind of help pass out some savings to some of our customers. So we've got that sale going on. Next week, next Monday, you'll see a Facebook post on what the next sale is going to be for the next week. So that's exciting. It's going to be every Monday until Christmas. The other thing, of course, don't forget about our DVD products. We do have those available. Excellent Christmas gifts. Schools. We get a lot of questions about the schools. One of the questions, of course, are we going to have that? Yes, we are going to have the schools. We've got 4 schools lined up. We've got the Sport Mod School, the 4-link school, the Stock Car School, and then the Pennsylvania School. We've got all those are lined up. And if for some reason that the COVID thing was to not cooperate, we're working on a deal to get those all 4 of those schools, or at least 3 of the schools, set up so we can just stream them right here from BHE. So we're going to have some opportunities and some options available there. We'll know more here in another week. So by the time we get back here in 2 weeks, we'll definitely have a lot more information about that. We might have to restrict the class sizes in-house. It just all depends on how this whole COVID thing goes. One of the things before we take any questions, last week, one of the things that Chad and I talked about on our ongoing off-season maintenance. And of course, the suspension cages are something that need a lot of attention. If you neglect those, your performance is not going to work. They're a precision-made piece to give you the maximum performance that you can get. So it's important to kind of understand what we need to do to keep getting that maximum performance. Here's an example. We had a guy, this is a couple of years ago. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but this bearing that came out of a cage is in multiple pieces. That's not how they're supposed to come out of the cage. This cage was never maintained for 2 years, and he kept complaining about how the car didn't function like it was supposed to, and he had handling problems and all this good stuff. Well, once again, due to lack of maintenance, it's pretty simple to understand. So Chad's going to take the time and kind of go over what you need to do with your cages and your brake floater and all that suspension in the back that moves around quite a bit. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Chad, and you can talk about that stuff.
Yeah, so that's one of the number one questions we get here is when to service your cage bearings, and obviously you don't want to go as long as that guy. So it's very important throughout the season to properly maintain your rear suspension and unhook the shocks and 4-link rods and spin that cage to relocate the grease. So Bob's got a cutaway, I got a cutaway, but this is a roller bearing. They're sealed from the factory. So we like to take the shock and spring off and just spin that all the way around, and it relocates the grease and puts your fingers on the cage so you can feel if there's any problems. So one of the worst problems that we have is water. So obviously that bearing that he's showing you there where it's all rusted on the inside, that's probably a classic scenario of a pressure washer pointed at the clamp rings, at the suspension cage, and the water gets inside of there and then of course makes rust. These bearings are not coated, they're raw steel. Same thing with your axle tube is probably raw steel, or some are powder coated, but that water gets in there and obviously makes rust, and it's a bad situation. So one of the things we recommend, now is the time of year you're taking all these cages off, you're spinning them, making sure they feel good. If there's any little glitch, I'd just put bearings in. It's not worth messing around with. But when you go to reinstall, then the key is, like, when you slide that over the axle tube, what trick that we like to use is the thickest, some old school heavy duty wheel bearing grease, like red and tacky, not a synthetic, and coat that axle tube with that thick bearing grease, and that makes a water barrier in between them two to try and help that water from getting inside of there. So, and then when you're pressure washing the car and you're pointing at them clamp rings have a gap in them, so they tighten up. So you just need to really focus on that and properly maintain that and make sure that everything stays clean. And when you wash the car, you blow it off as soon as you're done with compressed air. So as he said, the suspension cages are the lifeblood of the rear suspension. So you really need to focus on them, make sure they spin free and everything operates perfectly.
Now, what about the brake floater would be the same correct way, yes?
Correct. Same for the brake floater. And on the bronze cages on the right rear, same thing. The bronze cages, you're greasing them every night. So you're pushing the dirt out of there, pushing the water out of there. So they actually stay probably a little bit better around the axle tube than per se the bearing ones, unless you're really paying attention to where your water's going. So, this time of year, you would take everything off and just inspect everything, clean everything real good. And if the bearings feel fine, I'd keep running them. That's one of the questions is, how long should we run them? Well, I mean, if they feel good, they spin free and they're not rusty and broken like that, I would just keep running them. So if you maintain them properly, they last, we got guys with over 2 years on them. So, and then it depends on if you're running 20 nights or 50 nights. So,
sure.
It's all about you getting hands-on, unhooking the shocks and springs, spinning the cage, and feeling the suspension and making sure the bearings are good to go. So.
Well, and that's such a key deal, unhooking the shocks and taking the trailing arms off and rotating that cage, because that makes a tremendous amount of difference, getting that grease circulated through those bearings, because there's times where you'll feel the cage and it's not really tight, but it feels kind of, and you spin it one time, and man, the thing just like then all of a sudden it just wants to spin almost by itself. So it's just back to the maintenance part of the whole equation. You just have to really be careful with all that stuff, and that's the downside of our sport. To get the good quality stuff, you have to keep it good quality by putting in the time and maintaining them. And of course, those of you who have been to the schools, my favorite word, or the word I mentioned the most. And it's so important to maintain that stuff. It's you get out of it what you put into it, so to speak. Anything else you want to talk about with the cages? Of course, when you do take the cages off, it's going to give you time to check the heim joints and the trailing arms. It's going to give you time to check the trailing arms to make sure that before you even take them off, you should loosen them up and spin them to make sure that there's not a small bow in the trailing arm or whatever. And it just gives you the opportunity to disassemble everything in the back of the car and take it all apart and get it all ready to go for next year. Because the thing of it is, and we're not talking like this time of the year when, I don't know about you guys, how busy you are, but I'm not super duper busy. The weekend we even had to get out to the point where I just took a couple of rods and reels and put some weight on them and went out and casted them. And the dog thought that was the best thing in the world, chasing that casting plug. He had a great time. And we did that up until he wound up getting all tied up in the fishing rods, and then we decided it was time to skip that. But he had a good time. The other thing on the rear suspension I kind of want to mention to you about is, your the other thing, and Chad will talk about this, but this bearing that's in the top of this so that this can move freely, and then these bearings that you put in the top of the cup. Here's a situation where, this one was actually on the bottom. This customer had one on the top and on the bottom. But with that bearing being on the slider, you really only need this one bearing set in this cup. Well, as you can see, we'll put these in here and this moves pretty freely. Well, if these aren't maintained, you can kind of tell the difference in the sound here, that there's a little bit of a problem. So when you load this and these bearings are all ground up with rust, it's not going to work freely. So it's kind of like every other bearing that's in the car, it's got to be lubed. And I'll let Chad can tell you what he recommends on these, because it's another maintenance item that's crucial to the performance of the car.
Yeah, that 5-inch Torrington bearing, we like that on top of the spring, like in the front spring cups that'll be on top of the spring. And that lip cup, we did that so we could run this bearing. And then we also did the lip cup because of the alignment, but also to shield that bearing. So it was kind of a triple purpose deal there to get that. Well, then we had the customer there that went overkill and had 2 bearings on the rear. Well, when you're on the bottom and then you wash your car and then you leave a little bit of water in there, and then you see it doesn't take long. That car didn't have many nights on it. So, it's one of them things where you really got to pay attention to them bearings. They're very important. Those 5-inch Torrington bearings are going to create a bunch more maintenance for you. But, it's them springs, they like that bearing. So you're going to want to pay attention and keep them clean and greased. It doesn't take that long to take them apart and do that. So you don't want to get to that nasty sound Bob just made there. So.
Well, like this unit here, when you put it on the car, this spring is compressed to 8.5 inches. So it's got, 200 pounds of load on it. Well, all of a sudden now, if you know, if any of this stuff doesn't rotate like it's supposed to, just like this bearing underneath here, if it's not maintained, and this one's easy to get at, just squirt a little oil in there or something every week to make sure that this rotates easy. But if there's a little bit of a bind with all that load in there, it's going to change your spring rate. It's going to really mess up things on how that car is actually trying to function. And, you know, those of you guys, you've watched the amount of travel that these cars get. So, I mean, it's pretty important. And Chad says he's got the other one made, the mate to this, the deeper cup one. So that's cool. So that's available.
All boys, drop cups will be done shortly. So
awesome.
That's a lot of waste.
Yeah, I bet that is a lot of waste.
I love machine parts. But my boys are criticizing me all the waste on this one.
They are. I bet they are. So what else have you got new there from Weirs Machine, Chad? You want to share with us?
Oh, yeah. Debuting new stuff. That's what we do on Bob and Chad, right?
Yes.
So this is our new idle arm bolts that we just came out with. This was our buddy at B&B, Paul Berger. This was his vision. So kind of like what we did with the stock cars in the rear with the trailing arm bolts, where you got to go through the frame rail and get that socket into that bolt head. So we just extended the hex out to be outside the frame rail so you didn't have to go in there. Same thing on the front idle arm bolts. Some chassis builders will weld a nut on the frame. But if you don't want to do that, take the risk of stripping that out, then you can just drill that out and run this in the front frame rail, and this takes the hex outside the frame rail. So same situation as the real trailing arm bolts, just a nice little trick little bolt to make life easier.
Oh, that's a slick deal.
They're for Chevelle and metric frames. They're like an inch different or something like that. So.
Okay, so you have them available for both frames.
Correct. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Our first question, Don has a question for us. The question is, have you heard of anyone zero indexing at full droop? Thanks for the show. I'll let you have that one, Chad.
So, yeah, I mean, the term zero indexing is often miscombobulated. So, what you want to set the cage at, I need Billy to make us some more drawings.
There you go. Next one up.
Cage is level at ride height, and then when the car hikes, where the term zero index came from is that your two trailing arm bolts are lined up at virtually 6 and 12. So that would say 0. Okay, that's a straight up and down plane. However, the cage still rotates an index into the spring that 15 to 20 degrees depending on how much you're dropping out. So are people stopping with the cage level? I would not think that would have any traction at all, because you're not going to build traction with the index. So I'm going to call no on that. So the misconception is that zero indexes means the cage doesn't index at all through travel, which is false. You want the cage to index into the spring to build traction, but you want them rods to stop at 6 and 12 and not over index and be in bar locks. So, unless I'm wrong, there could be somebody running some weird stuff, but as far as I know, and I think as far as you know, Bob, that cage has to index to build traction. So,
yeah, if you don't, because when all of this scenario first came out, we kind of had that same misconception that it meant that it was supposed to be zero index. Well, if that doesn't index into the spring, it does not gain traction. I mean, it's a combination, and what this originally came about for was people wanted to make sure that upper bar wasn't over centering and the thing going around and tearing stuff up, or it wasn't getting into a bar lock situation. Because what happens was that upper link, when it got in a perfect angle where it was straight up and down, it was almost like a solid suspension for a split second. And what would happen is when it was to reach that moment, it would shear traction, and then all of a sudden, you had traction, and it was gone. Or it would over center. So then that's when the zero indexing came about, is we just relocated the arm on the chassis, and Chad built brackets for his cages that relocated on chassis so that we could still get all kinds of angle in that upper bar to create traction. but it did not have anything to do with indexing into the spring. You're always going to want to have it pre-indexed into the spring a certain amount. Some guys use different amounts. We're usually in that 6-7 degree range, but it's that motion has got to always be producing. You have to be pushing up on this spring while the chassis is lifting away from it to maintain traction in that left rear. So it's very important to understand that. Hi, Fred. How's everything out in California? Is that one of those Wilwood calipers on your desk, Bob? By gosh, I appreciate you, Fred. This is one of the new Wilwood IMCA legal calipers. The thing that's pretty trick about this caliper is you don't have to have a right or a left, because you can take this bleeder, put your brake fitting in here, and put the bleeder here, or vice versa. So it works both ways. It's lighter weight, and it's something that's originally designed strictly for the racing purposes. We have them in stock right now. It's an excellent part, very cleanly made. Wilwood did an awesome job with this caliper. And like I said, when I noticed it, first thing when I get a new part in, especially if it's going on the suspension, it goes on the scale. And when I seen the scale numbers, I'm like, well, this is cool. And then, of course, I had already heard about the multiple locations. So, we've got ones every one of them that's on the shelf is the same exact part number. And you can use it left or right. So those of you guys that carry a spare, now you don't have to have a left or a right. So this is an awesome, in my opinion, this is a real nice deal. Wilwood did a great job with this. It's a very piece, and like I said, it is IMCA approved. So those of you guys with IMCA sport mods, IMCA modifieds, stock cars, whatever, this is actually legal now. And like I said, it is lighter than some of the competitors out there. Wasota Midwest modified spring ahead 100 springs ahead. 100 left rear, 250 right rear. How much chain length slack on the left rear at ride height, heat tacky, mud, and feature for tacky and dry. 15 degrees, 15-inch lowers, 10 degrees, 17-inch right, and a 10-degree uphill. The question would be how much chain length slack on the left rear at ride height. Well, you'd really want to measure that. If I'm understanding this question for sure, you'd want to really measure that at droop. Once again, what I always do is a jack up underneath the seat, the driver's seat part on the left rear, and I jack that up, and I always set mine, and I don't know, each car is different, so I can't really give you a specific chain length, but you just want to get it to the point where you've got the angle that you need and the droop that you need, and measure your chain length from that. So I apologize, I can't give you a specific one, because like I said, I don't know what the chassis is to give you that exact length. One thing I can tell you about the chain is the left rear chain needs to be mounted inboard on the axle housing, because you want that chain so that your wheels are out here, your axle housing's in here. The right one, you want it out where it's at, because it's not going to bother you at all. But the left one needs to be, we slide ours in as far as we can to the center section, and then put the chain there, so that when you limit the chain, it doesn't try to pull the left rear tire off the ground. It just slows that motion down. So, the chain length there, you might have to have a little shorter chain, because it's going to move farther because of the location. But that's key on the left rear for traction, moving that chain inboard on the axle tube. What's the proper way to check birdcage indexing on a 4-link with the Weirs bird cages?
So our cage plates are square to the world. So on our our 4-link suspension on the shock plate. The bottom should be flat, so you can put a angle finder on there. We do send a bubble level with it in the plate, and the bubble level is simply when you make a change, you can reference that bubble and then make the bar change and then adjust the links to make sure that it's the same without having to put an angle finder on it. So either edge of that, you can put them little magnetic angle finders on there. Otherwise, my buddy Willie Krupp at Willie's Carbon Dyno Shop makes a index checker that goes over the 2 bolts, which is a pretty nice little tool. And we've had all kinds of people ask us to make one, and out of respect for my old buddy Willie, we'll just let you buy his.
Awesome. Arrow question on a Wasota B mod with crate engine with a 4-inch spoiler. Is it better to have the shorter roof to get more air on the spoiler? You know, there's been all kinds of different theories on that. My personal opinion, I would probably run the roof a little bit shorter to get more air on the spoiler. You know, we've not had any wind tunnel testing or whatever, but in theory, the air always drops wherever the plane is. Like say your roof is at this plane, wherever air goes, it will drop right after that, and then it hits whatever's next. So in my opinion, if you have a too long of a roof, you're not going to get the full effect of the spoiler air. And if you can get it more towards the point where it's hitting the deck lid more right at the axle area compared to way back by the spoiler, you're going to have better control, in my opinion. However, you do lose a little bit of side force with that action. So sometimes you have to kind of pick and choose. But in my opinion, I would run a little shorter spoiler or a little shorter roof if I had that option and it was legal to do so. I'm busy as a 1-armed paper hanger. Awesome, Greg. I'm glad you're that busy. I asked this on the left rear, partially with the zero indexing cage. Particularly with the zero indexing cage, how do you determine the optimal length of the limit chain? Well, once again, you know, my opinion is the fact that depending on how much load and where you want the load at, like on a GRT car, we run 18 3/8 is probably our max, sometimes 18.5. But once again, the actual length is going to determine on where it's actually mounted. But the actual drop wise, what I go by is your upper link. And normally we set the upper link to the point where when we jack it up under full droop on a 4-bar car is somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 to 48 inches.
Degrees,
I'm sorry, 45 to 48 degrees of angle on that upper bar. And that's kind of where I set my final droop number at. And then, of course, we adjust it from there depending on the situation. Besides stopping the shock from maximum extending, what is the left rear chain doing to tighten the setup? Well, once again, it's totally two different things, because where your shock is mounted, it's going to have a different leverage point on the car than where the chain's mounted. So if you use the shock as a stopping device, what's going to happen is it's going to try to unload that spring a little bit, because if your shock is in the front of the cage compared to your spring behind, it's going to change the amount of travel, and it's going to change how that actually tries to unload the car a little bit. So with it being on the actual housing, you're actually just stopping it on the housing. Plus the fact that due to the fact that we're in the shock business, we've seen a lot of calamities so to speak, happen when you bottom out or top out that left rear shock over a period of time. You got to think about the pistons and the shims and all the parts that are in the shock. Well, if you slam it apart numerous times, it's going to affect what's inside there, and it's going to cause some handling problems because the shock is going to go away. What's the difference of rotating the bearing or the cup on the ball of the jack bolt? Well, the big thing is, of course, yeah, go ahead, Chad.
You're talking versus the 5-inch Torrington bearing and why you need it. So
yeah, versus that compared to this.
Yeah, so this bearing is mainly for the articulation of the screw jack and the cup. When this thing is under load, it's not going to spin very freely. But when you put that 5-inch Torrington bearing in there, you get so much more bearing space. So the bigger the spring, the bigger that bearing is, the easier that bearing is going to want to rotate with the spring. So that's why the two work hand in hand so well.
Well, that one wasn't conductor. See, the thing that's the big difference here is when you have this spring and then we have this bearing out here. Now that's the same size as the spring. So as this spring tries to, when it compresses, it's going to turn and swivel and do those type of things. Where with this bearing, you're covering the whole surface of the actual spring compared to if you're just using this. Now all of a sudden you're trying to load that and that cup won't rotate, and then this bearing, it's not designed in a rotation fashion. It's designed to actually, just like Chad said, I don't remember what those fancy words were, but articulate.
Yeah.
I don't
so it's for angular alignment, not
yeah.
rotational. Yeah.
Chad's got an engineer now on staff too, so it's going to even get better.
We're extremely dangerous now.
Yeah, but anyway, that's the big difference, because what we're doing now is we're fixing it so that this spring can turn here easily, where now it's hard for that to actually happen. Ryan wants to know, Chad, if you've looked into 3D printing those cups to eliminate waste.
Yeah, unfortunately, plastic won't work for a spring cup, but that would eliminate a lot of waste. Actually, 3D printing is more expensive than people would imagine. You know, the plastic that we use is a carbon infused onyx material, it's called. So it's actually really strong. You know, if you want to do something crazy and try a spring cup, I'd print you one, but I bet you don't make it through turn one. So plastic is good in certain situations, and you know, trying to take that little tiny bearing there and put that amount of force on that plastic, you'd have to have so much material that it wouldn't work. Is that what I say in my opinion?
There you go. Yeah, you actually start with, in my opinion.
In my opinion, sorry.
That gives you an out. So if you say the wrong stuff, it's just my opinion. And I actually was going to say, well, today my opinion is. But anyway, hi guys, thanks for the informative show. What are your thoughts on the IMCA rule changes for 2021? No spring preloaded or pin springs. Sorry if this question is already been asked, but just tuned in. No, that question actually hasn't been asked. I really think we need to know more about those actual rules. And I haven't actually called, because I sort of thought I would probably wait a couple weeks until the calls kind of died down a little bit from those guys. You know, I think the front end wise, I think we've kind of got that deal figured out pretty decent. What we're going to do is, you know, like, and our cars we don't run a lot of preload. We run maybe 1 or 2 turns of preload. And so we're just going to use the load stick and figure out what that preload is. And then we might end up having to change spring rate slightly to get that ride height and get all those numbers to be the same. I don't know. I've not really addressed that issue, and maybe you can tell me, Chad. Is that still going to pertain to like the left rear spring on an A-mod?
That's a good question. I mean, the right front, I think, is the main concern where they're pulling it down real, where you can run a really soft right front spring and tie it down an inch, 2 inches, whatever they're doing. But it's going to simplify the setups a little bit. That the tying down preloading springs is, you need to spend a lot of time with the stick, and you need to have a ton of data, and it's kind of a hit and miss where, it's a lot easier just put a 550-pound spring in there and dial it in, based on that. But, is it going to change anything? The cream's still going to rise to the top, so they'll figure it out.
I do think it's going to simplify. I mean, granted, and I think the class that really, suffered from it, I think is going to probably be the one that's going to, help some of those guys be, not as technical. But like Chad said, I really think their right front was their issue, because I've seen some of them springs to the point where they put a soft enough spring in there and they compress it so much that it's almost virtually coil bound to start off with. And what happens when you have a situation like that, all of a sudden it takes a little bit different, I shouldn't say skill level, but a little bit different experience of how you drive the car compared to how you were driving the car when you got, when your front end was moving a lot more. Rigid front end definitely has some speed to it, but it's more difficult to drive. So I actually think the rules that IMCA came out with are perfectly fine. I think the merit behind it is good. I was actually going to text Brett and say good job on that, but then I thought I better just wait and call him, because otherwise he might think I was being a smart aleck or something. So no, I think they did a good job. I mean, I think it's going to simplify some things.
Simple is sometimes better, because the Snowball Derby, which is the biggest asphalt race in the world, and I know you know a little bit about asphalt racing, Bob, with your Moffitt days, but their bump stop, bump spring, $7,000 shock packages, and Toby Noodleman, the local team here, and Ty Majeski, they just won that Snowball Derby, $25,000 to win on AFCO non-adjustable shocks with no bump stops, and the rest of the asphalt world is just.
Yeah, I heard that.
Sometimes simple is better.
That's just awesome. I mean, take the car, keep it simple, dial it in, use what you know. I mean, sure, Joe over here, he might be doing this stuff, but just because he's doing it doesn't mean you need to do it. I mean, if you're running fast, don't change the package up until you actually have to do something different. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. But whatever. Don't just change something for a change. USR B-Mod with the right rear spring on top. Where should the right rear spring be located on the axle tube? Has the spring mount pretty close to the brake rotor, and the car seems to be tight on entry all the time. Thanks, Bob and Chad, for your help. In my opinion, I think that the center of that right rear spring needs to be somewhere between 10 and 12 inches from the rotor. I think it needs to be more inboard. When you put something like that a little bit more inboard, what it does is it makes it so that everything is a little more forgiving, so to speak. With that being clear out by the right rear, or closer to the right rear tire, what happens is your spring rate now, because we're talking wheel rate, which means you have to figure out where your spring's mounted in relationship to the center of the wheel. Well, the closer you get to the center of the wheel, the more impact that spring's going to have on that tire. Well, then all of a sudden, but since it's closer, to get it to roll, it's further from the center of the car, so you're going to have to go softer with that spring. Well, when you go softer with the spring, now we're not loading the tire quite as hard, or when we do load it, we load it quicker. So when it rolls over, you have to have a soft enough spring to get it to roll over, but it loads the tire so fast that I think it creates a I mean, I would be willing to bet that this car is tighter than heck getting in, and it's probably loose from the center off the corner. And that's a characteristic. If you move that inboard, you'll have to go a little heavier on spring, but it's going to make the car more, we always used to run springs more of an angle, 15-degree angle in. Now, with it being on the top, you're not going to be able to do that, but I would run it more inboard. Now, don't go overboard, but I mean, inboard is better. Like I said, somewhere in the 12-inch range, 10 to 12 inches from the rotor is actually where we're usually at. IMCA Sport Mod, can you touch base on what the right rear chain does for setup, and would you suggest tightening the chain for a slick racetrack for the feature? It is a tuning tool to get just to get the car over on the, Is it a tuning tool to just get the car over on the right rear faster? Please educate us on tuning and the use of that right rear chain. First of all, Ty, it doesn't have anything to do with on how fast the car is going to get over on the right rear. What the chain is going to do is when it gets over there, it's going to limit what it can come back off there. The downside to a chain, if you had a racetrack that was smooth as glass, the downside to the chain is going to be, on a smooth racetrack, it's going to be pretty decent because you could actually put a real small amount of preload in it. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to keep that right rear from gaining angle, the right rear trailing arm from gaining angle, and allowing the left rear to gain more angle, which is going to give that car more traction because we're limiting how much it can come back up off of that right rear. The downside is if there's a little bit of a roughness or if there's a rut or whatever, and you hit a rut with that chain being tied down, that's a mess. What I do, like on our sport mods, is I set that chain. I jack the car up until the spring is free, and I set the spring the chain so that it has one turn of preload on the spring, so that the spring itself never comes and gets loose. There's always some tension on the spring, but I don't ever clamp the car down to the spring like at ride height. You'll get traction, but boy, it's going to make it a little more finicky to drive. Penn, Ohio stock cars. What loads are the most important to focus on with the Weirs load stick and the amount that you would try to get as a baseline? Go ahead, Chad.
Your own loads, not something else from somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, I could give you a number, but I don't really have any idea. Well, first of all, it kind of depends on even your sock location as far as what the load's going to be. It's more about the loads. There's not necessarily a magic number that's out there that we can tell you about as far as a baseline. The biggest thing is just getting your loads and experimenting with it to the point where you can use that. Now, all of a sudden, here's my baseline load. Say it's 1,350 pounds. So when you change a spring or you make some adjustment, it's easy to go back with that load stick, change a spring, set the load stick, use the load stick to set the spring so that it's at that same load number on that right front tire. Because when you do that, then you're actually being able to notice that, okay, what I changed was the spring. If you change the spring and you can't focus on, well, my load number with the 600-pound spring was 1,350, and my load number with the 700-pound spring, it needs to be the same so you can tell the spring change actually made a difference or it didn't make a difference. So it's just something you kind of have to experiment with. That's about. Well, there's our old buddy Pat. Ho ho! He's kind of a Santa Claus kind of guy, don't you think?
He is. Got your gift today, Pat. Thank you.
Yes, we got one on the desk too. I'm amazed. We're still even on the mailing list. That's impressive. I was excited. My old buddy Pat still remembered us. What do you like for right front, right rear alignment? Well, I'm not completely sure, CJ, what the question is, but I'm assuming you're probably wanting to know like how far inboard from the right front that you run the right rear. It kind of depends on the car. Kind of depends on, if you're a big spoiler car, you'll actually run those two closer together. Like an IMCA type modified, we'll run probably an inch and a half, an inch difference. The right front will be leading the right rear by an inch for a heat race type situation. And then we probably will take the half-inch spacer out of there and put it on the left rear and bring that into an inch and a half. As far as alignment goes, right rear, we don't camber the rear ends or anything like that. And normally I try to run the right rear pretty well square to the right front as far as toe in or toe out. In the right front, you probably just need to kind of go by what your chassis manufacturer says. 6 degrees of camber is probably pretty common, and caster wise all depends on what spindles you have, somewhere between 4 and 6 degrees. Wissota Midwest Modified, 15 degrees and length at ride height left rear. What degree do I want at droop to make the chain? Actually, I would say like what we do on our sport mod cars, you're starting at, we start at about 28 degrees. You're starting at 15 degrees. I would say at full droop, you're going to want to be in that, you're going to want to gain 10 degrees. You're going to probably want to be at that 25 degree mark when you set your chain, and then experiment with it a little bit at a time, a quarter of an inch one way or the other. What do you have for a right rear slider short enough to go top of the rear end housing to the frame with an 11-inch spring, 14-inch ride height, and squeezing spring down to 7 to 8 inches under load? Do you have anything that's short?
Yeah, we call it the Mini. So it's a 251M. It's a Mini. I'm not sure if it's online. I know Austin was working on that. So we did this. There was a chassis builder from Iowa that did this like 10 years ago. So we made some Minis, and he had some issues. It's real. You're flirting with only a few inches there. So if you can get it timed out and have it work right and not bottom out, it's good. But when it bottoms out, it's not good. So we do have a Mini. I think we can get it dialed in. We got a couple chassis builders using it now again. So we got a couple different shaft links that we can try to get it dialed in. But give us a call tomorrow, and we can get you them links. I don't have them right here off the top of my head, but I know that we're right in that realm there to go on top of the axle tube. So,
Mike, shock and spring mounts on the cages. What height, set of holes do you recommend, starting at the front and at the rear? When, if ever, do you want to change those heights? That's actually a timing deal. What's your standard recommendation, Chad?
I'd say probably 75% of the modified world is at a 7-inch drop on the left rear and a 6 or a 5 on the right rear. Some guys are 6-inch left rear, 5-inch right rear. So you want a 1-inch split at least. The higher you raise it up, the faster it's going to index. So, maybe on a super speedway like a 3/8 or a half, you'd be down in that 7. And then when you go to the short track to get that thing to rotate in quicker, you'd raise it up to the 6. Or a lot of guys ain't moving them, Bob. I don't know when the last time you moved yours was, but once you get your chassis, whatever you got for a brand there, they're going to have where they have all their notes off of. So I would do what they're doing and just work accordingly.
Yeah, that's not something that I've actually ever really changed. We run 7 on the left and 6 on the right, and that's pretty standard setup. We played with it years back, a couple of years ago. Couldn't really see for the amount of work and how, because when you change all that stuff, you got to change everything, and so it's not something you want to do like at the racetrack, unless you really have everything all set up, but whatever. Eric, tips on rear trailing arm angles on a metric car using adjustable brackets on the rear end, stock location on the chassis. In my personal opinion, and you're in that kind of like that with Soda B-Mod length and angles, somewhere in that 20-degree range on that left rear and somewhere in that 10-degree range on that right rear would be a good baseline to start with. I like having that split. Like our Sport Mod standard setup on our Sport Mod, the left rear is at 18 degrees and the right rear is at 5. So we try to keep that 10-inch split or 10-degree split. I think that works very well. Kyle's got a question. Tooling. Do you want to level the bird cage at the right height, or would you index one way or another depending on the left rear or right rear?
So on the two-link cars, I don't know how you do it, Bob, but most of the chassis builders will put their 7 degrees of pinion angle in and have the cage level. So
that's how we do it.
That way, when you make a bar change on a two-link car, you always know that your shock plate's level. We got the little bubble level in there, so you can change the left rear, right rear trailing arm, level the cage, and then you got your 7 to 9 inches or 7 to 9 degrees of pinion angle, and you can go right back out on the speedway and be good to go. So.
That works really well because with those plates being level, you can kind of look underneath there to make sure your pinion angle is pretty close to where it's supposed to be. So that's what we do. Our jig's set up so that it's 7 degrees of pinion angle and the plates are level. At ride height, shock bolts need to be loose, just like chain has to be loose. Okay, Zane, okay, so that's a good question. Is that the left rear that we're talking about, or are we talking about the right front? Currently have a 19-inch right side trailing arm on an older Sport Mod. Looking to shorten it this winter. Is it better to build a shortened bracket for the frame, or are the Shaw style brackets a good idea even though it moves it up and in front of the center line on the rear end?
Not on the right rear.
What?
Are we talking about the right rear?
Yeah.
Trailing arm?
Yeah, right side trailing arm. I would shorten it on the frame. I've not played with those Shaw style brackets an awful lot, so I can't really give you it's evident that it works because they use it.
Yeah, we mainly do the Shaw on the left rear. The right rear, I don't know why I personally, in my opinion, I don't know why you would want to shorten the right rear trailing arm. I would always make the right rear trailing arm longer than the left so you have more traction and you slow the wheelbase change down. But we don't run I don't know if Shaw's running the Shaw on the right rear just to have it on there, but my perfect scenario would be Shaw left rear standard, right rear under the center line of the axle, but I'm not sure. That's my favorite setup.
Left side trailing arm is 16.5 inches.
So that's 2.5 inches of split.
Yeah. I don't know. It kind of depends on what you want to do there. Either way.
Long hole. If you want to try them the same length, just to get the car to rotate. But I'd leave that long one in there if you get to a big sweeping corner. But.
All right, 13 minutes. Chad Weir's bedtime is coming up quick. Well, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate that. By golly, we are almost done. Bob, you said when using a 100-pound left rear spring to scale with a 175. I've actually done that just because sometimes scaling with that left rear, by the time you get the load and stuff in there, what I meant when I said the 175 is that basically so that all of our data that we had from before we knew where the car would be scaled at with the 175. I know that there's guys that are scaling it with a preloaded spring. And you're just going to have to, with that preloaded spring, you're going to end up having a little bit less or a little bit more left rear bite in the car. And I couldn't actually tell you what that number is because, like I said, that's kind of how our standard setup was, is put that 175 front in there, get the car all scaled right, and then bolt the left rear in as it's preloaded and go with it from there. Marcus said all four corners on the IMCA modified. Well, if that is correct, that's going to present a little bit more of a challenge on that left rear if if you're not able to preload that left rear. So Zane, you figure that out and come back on here and tell us how that's supposed to work. What's a good starting point for spring rates on a sport mod with a small metric stub, and what are the disadvantages of running the metric stub? Well, your spring rate's going to be a little bit stiffer. How much stiffer I really can't actually tell you. More than likely on the metric stub, we tend to see about 50 to 100 pounds stiffer. And the reason is because the length of the A-frame is different and the stub is actually narrower. So with that, you're dealing with, I don't have a lower A-frame that I can actually get at, but if you measure where the center of the spring is on a lower control arm, in comparison to the Chevelle, the metric is a lot closer to the inner mounting point, and it's further away from the ball joint. So you're talking about a ratio that instead of it being, yeah, go ahead. Thanks. Garrett just got this for us. So what you're talking about is you can see from this center point to here and this center point to here is different. The metric, this part is moved in here closer, so your leverage is going to be different. So that's kind of why those cars, in a sense, need to have a little bit stiffer front spring because of that. Is there a disadvantage? I don't think there's a disadvantage. It's just, your spring rate needs to be a little bit different. And if you can adjust your wheel width with spacers, the metric stub should do just as good a job. We always run the Chevelle stubs just because that's what we started with. And I'll be honest with you, why we started, when we picked out the Chevelle back in the early 80s, when we first built our first IMCA modified, it goes back to that asphalt thing. Who is the most famous guy that ever drove a Chevelle car on pavement? And that was Ed Howe. Well, then when the Camaro stub came out, which is when Camaro actually copied a lot of or GM simulated the Camaro stub a lot off of the Chevelle stub. Well, we needed to have a full frame car that would go back from behind the driver. So we went, and that's when we started with the Chevelle. And like I said, I'd like to take the credit. It was some brainchild that I did, but I didn't. I looked at Ed Howe and I'm like, this guy's successful. There's got to be a reason. And then when we looked into it, that's when we were building a lot of stock stub late model cars with a Chevelle or with a Camaro. And so anyway, needless to say, sorry about that story. Chad, putting a new car together. Got any package deals for front and rear suspension?
Really, our stuff is so modular. We got so many options. We don't really have a package, so it's kind of a la carte and tune accordingly to what you or your chat builder wants. So just give us or Bob a call. We'll get you dialed in.
All right, Zane says, per IMCA on the new shock rule and preload, your shock bolt has to come out without pushing down on the car. So it's like the chain rule needs to be loose at ride height. Well, that should make it more interesting. I didn't think that it was going to, I guess I wasn't thinking it was going to affect the left rear, but so it should be a challenge. Yeah, we already did that one. Is there any advantage to using a spring preloader versus a coilover shock? I'm not sure that I know what a preloader spring is.
It's an asphalt thing, the spring preloader, which it doesn't work on the right rear of a dirt car. I heard there's some guys trying to do it on the left rear, but I don't have a lot of intel on it. It doesn't work on the right rear because you come off the spring because it's preloaded to a certain height, and when you're hiking, and then when you free fall onto that, it's wicked bad. So that's about all the intel I got on the preloaders. Hi,
Joey. Thanks for tuning in. I'm assuming you're keeping our old buddy KS out of trouble. I heard, I've seen a deal on Facebook that he's moving his toy cars to St. Louis and selling the shop and stuff like that. Basically, moving everything back to St. Louis. So I can understand the situation. The cost of running one of those teams is expensive, and I can understand that. I'm going to have to give my old buddy KS a call tomorrow. I haven't talked to him since, actually I haven't talked to him since we were up at 141. 16-inch left rear, 100-pound spring. How much preload on both springs? Coil eliminator limits. I'm using a 250 13-inch right rear and a 100-pound 16-inch. Both are front of the housing, shocks in the rear. It's kind of a common thing. A lot of guys are using that softer left rear because you can put more preload in it. It's going to get the car to hike up a little bit quicker. And you can adjust the amount of load on the tire. I think it's just one of those situations. Actually, I think where the left rear spring like that actually helps the car is I think it helps the car. Anytime you get a lot of movement on the left rear, it's forcing itself down on the right front. So I think what that's doing is actually it's doing a couple things. It's helping the car get up on that left rear, but it's really helping it get over on that right front. So the combination, the car kind of tips over on the right front, dives the right front, puts load on that right front tire, helps the car turn. I think it's a good package. The thing that you got to keep in mind on a left rear that's preloaded a lot and it's moving a lot, I don't really care what brand of spring you have. That 100-pound spring, you might go through a couple of them, just because what's going to happen is it's going to bow, and when the spring bows, it's going to bend. And then the spring's not going to function the same way as it should have before. How often do the bushings need to be replaced in the Weirs pull bar?
We recommend 25 races, but we've had people run our big bushing and our 7-puck 60 nights. So it's kind of depends on the situation, how heavy the racetrack is. The heavier it is, the more grip there is, the harder you are on the pucks. So we recommend 25 nights.
Ryan, I hate to keep you up, but hate to keep you up. I appreciate that, Ryan. I'm glad you're thinking of us, man. I like that. What a nice guy. But do you have any suggestions on a spring manufacturer that makes a progressive spring 5x9-inch, a 350 to a 600? I don't.
Pull bar spring? Are you talking about a pull bar spring? Because they make those, but
5-inch by 9-inch would almost make me believe this is a right front combination.
Not available.
Could be wrong, but that's what I'm assuming it's the case. Starting pull bar spring recommendations on a Wasota A mod. Boy, Aaron, that's another wide, a lot of guys use the progressive spring. A lot of guys use 1,250 pound spring. It all depends on the amount of preload in it, and it also depends on a concept motor. Yeah, I would say that 1,200 is probably not a bad idea. You're going to want it to absorb a little bit of the traction so it doesn't completely overload the motor. But in my opinion, or no, actually, concept motor, you get all kinds of horsepower. What was I thinking? A 1,200 pound spring, some guys are running a 1,500 pound spring, but with that pull bar, it just all depends on how much preload you actually put on it, is really what makes the difference. Yep, Ryan says right front. I was guessing that 350 to 600 pound spring was when the 5x9.
The next guy's got it dialed in.
I really don't know. If you find one, tell me how that works.
Chris has it dialed right in. Cheater.
Yeah. So, all right, guys, we're past our
overtime pay.
Overtime. All right. Well, once again, thanks everybody for tuning in. Don't forget, we've got our gift certificates are 10% discount this week. Our Landrum Springs, 10% discount. That's a pretty decent discount, especially if you're going to be buying 4 new springs, which you really should be putting new springs in the car anyway. So give us a call, and all those questions with that you have for Chad, give him a call on any of the parts that you need. They're the Weirs parts. So we appreciate it. Once again, we enjoyed doing this. We'll be back 2 weeks from today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.